We are diving back into the strains of yesterday, exploring where our weed came from and the legends that got us there. And today, we're going to the Middle East, and we're taking a look at the famous, the legendary Lebanese hash. Yeah. Now, in some places in the world, hash is and always was king of the mountain. And hash is pretty much the OG concentrate. It's the original one. And it's been made for centuries by separating those glandular trichomes of the cannabis plant from the rest of the material. They take that, they mush it together into a ball or a brick or something like that can then be eaten, smoked, or traded. Lovely thing there. And the king of hash, at least for a long time, always was Lebanon. It's a small country in the Middle East that's played a pivotal role in the area all the way back to the time of the Phoenicians. So pretty much all of civilization, Lebanon has been a hot spot. And the best hash in Lebanon comes from the Bekaa Valley. It's nestled between two mountains right next to the Syrian border. And some people say this is one of the best environments in the world to grow marijuana. There's fertile soil. There's lots of sun. It's Lebanon's premier agricultural district. And believe it or not, they do a lot of, it features a lot of Lebanese wine. It's a big wine producing region, which is pretty cool as well. And it's from here that the most famous of hashes, the Lebanese hash, originated. That famous Lebanese red. If you know what I'm talking about, I know you're already getting excited. You're salivating for that Lebanese red. I know it. Now, Lebanese hash always came in two forms, right? And both phenomenal in their own rights. Now, the blonde hash was known as the working man's hash. It was more available, cheaper, it was stronger, more easier to produce. Now, it was harvested a little bit earlier than red Lebanese hash. The plants were harvested a little bit earlier at peak THC production. That's when those trichomes, they're crystal clear or have this milky white note to them. That's when THC production is at its highest. So when they harvest that, put that together, it's a little bit complex than its red friend, but you still get that spicy, woody notes, a little bit of an earthy aroma, but the high is intense, it's bright, you get those sativa effects, strong. It's the working man's hash. It's everything you need. Now the red, the Lebanese red is a legend all unto itself. Aficionados everywhere remember this as the ultimate Lebanese hash. It's a little more refined than its blonde cousin. They leave it to age in the fields a little bit longer. So those milky white, those clear trichomes start to turn an amber color. Those pistils on the flower, they start to turn this deep red. And that's going to give the Lebanese red its color. And the extra time it spends aging in the sun is going to allow the UV rays to start breaking down that THC to allow other cannabinoids to come forward, giving it more of a complex profile. And it's allowed to age and cure for a season or two after it's been made to kind of let those flavors and those aromas kind of liven up and rich in the plant. CBN particularly is one cannabinoid that's been been found in Lebanese red in higher amounts. And CBN has a little bit more of a sedated effect. So Lebanese red gets this indica vibe, this mellowed out kind of high, even when it's produced from a sativa landrace. And people who tasted it back in its heyday have memories of that soft juniper, cedar notes, little spicy flavor, forward notes to it, an earthy aroma living strong in those memories. That's what people say they remember. But why is most of the old world loyal to hash, not flower? Why do they do it? Now, if you remember, through most of history, there's been no real way to store or transport cannabis to kind of preserve what it is. And it's only been a recent phenomenon that weed is strong as it is. If it's up in the 20% world, it's always lived in these like single-digit percentages. So when you concentrate it into hash, it's a better smoke, it's more concentrated, it's easier to smoke, it's easier to store, and it's easier to trade. So it just made more sense. Now, originally, workers would take the flowers of those plants, rub them together in their hands, and the oils and the trichomes would all break apart. And the resin they would find on their hands, they would roll it together into charas. That's what they called it. And they'd roll that into a ball that would be ready to be smoked and eaten. If you ever heard of temple balls, that's where that's coming from. Now, Lebanese and also Afghani hash at the time became the cream of the crop of the marijuana world when they developed the dry sift technique. And that came about in the 15th century when there was this big marijuana boom across the world. And it was the cleanest and most efficient way to get cannabis or get the trichomes out of the plant. So they would cut down the plant, let it dry in this central drying area in the middle of town, had little light white walls to reflect the sun back on there, and they would let that dry for about 2 weeks. Then they would break up the plant, work it through a fine silk filter to kind of separate all the trichomes, and it became the most cleanest, efficient way to get hash from the cannabis plant. And it became the calling card of the best Lebanese hash in the world. And the Bekaa Valley, they've been rocking this hash out for forever, for centuries, for a long time. And production didn't really dip until the 1900s when the whole world went through this anti-cannabis craze. It was reefer madness all over the place. And that kind of crackdown lasted until about the 70s. So Lebanon was kind of the cultural and financial hub of the Middle East. They called it the Switzerland of the Middle East. So that kind of economic boom allowed the government to kind of stamp out cannabis a little bit. They could pay people to farm something else, tell them to, or just ignore it completely. But in the mid-70s, they went through a whole revolution that tore that kind of economic security in the country apart. And that's when a lot of people went back to doing what they've always done, farming hash plants. So, and if you ever tasted Lebanese hash, it probably came from the 70s and 80s when this resurgence of fine Lebanese hash came about. So that is probably when the Lebanese hash, the red Leb, found the legend that they have today.